Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Thank you for your enthusiasm for attending these discussions. And my name is Nazif. I'm the student from the graduate program of history at the Faculty of Cultural Science. And welcome to Jogja, Dr. Maarten, and nice to meet you. And until 11 o'clock, we will have discussions about tracing Indonesian's roots in Europe. So this is kind of the new perspective in how history can be done by combining archive and the work of microscopy. And before we start, I'd like to invite Dr. Fakih for delivering opening remarks.
Thank you so much. Well, first of all, I'd like to greet Dr. Maarten Fornerod for his visit here to our campus, which will be, I think, this topic that you are going to deliver is going to be very useful for all of us in the department. We are really interested in developing, or at least sort of exploring, interdisciplinary aspects of history, and this interdisciplinary aspect, considering DNA and biology, is such an interesting topic. So I'm here on behalf of the head of the department, Dr. Abdul Wahid, who unfortunately can't come at this moment. Again, as I said, welcome, and thank you so much for your presentation, and I'm sure it will be very beneficial and we'll all enjoy your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Fakih. Okay, before we start, so Dr. Maarten is an associate professor in cell biology, Erasmus Medisch Centrum in Rotterdam, Netherlands. And he also is secretary of East Indies Genealogical Society. And please, Dr. the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you for being here. This will be my first time lecturing in Indonesia. I'm very happy to be here and invited by Dr. Zoritno, especially because he is not only very famous here, but he's also world famous in the Netherlands. Because here we see Dr. Zoritno on the Dutch television last year on a program of kind of in Holland a famous presenter of a television program, Hans Goedkoop. And Dr. Zoritno explained about the historical aspects of his interest of Hans Goedkoop into Indonesia, because he has an Indonesian family history. And then I explained a little bit about the DNA, about his personal family history, and what the DNA can tell you about this personal family history. So there's a lot of interest in Indonesia in the Netherlands at the moment. So this is the program that was broadcast last year. It was called Indonesia Roept, like Indonesia Calls, and it was the eighth series on the television in the Netherlands. So why is there so much interest at the moment in Indonesia in the Netherlands? It's simply because there are 1 to 2 million Dutch people that have Indonesian heritage, and so this is a random selection of Dutch people who have Indonesian heritage. So maybe you recognize some of them. For example, there's a famous swimmer, Kromo Diwojo. There's a famous soccer players, politicians, writers. So Reggie Bai is there. I think some of you know him. He sends his regards to you all. Sorry? Yes. And so one of these persons is my father. I don't know if you recognize who my father is among these. You think in the middle? No, not in the middle. It's him. This is my father as a young man, much younger than I am now. And this is my father when he was still much younger. So this was his passport picture. So Willy, my father's called Willy. When he was 12 years old, and he went with his parents. So my grandmother and my grandfather, Omarin, Oma Paul. He went in 1939. He went for 6 months to the Netherlands because they had been living in Gombong and Bandung and Jakarta for a long time. Their families were living here for many generations. But since my grandfather worked in the railroads and he was a civil servant, he was allowed to go 6 months on leave in the home country. Of course, it was not his home country, but it was nice to go and play tourist. So he went to Paris. But then their idea was to return to Indonesia in May 1940 from Rotterdam. But then the Second World War started, so they could not go back. And so that's why he arrived in the Netherlands, and they never went back to Indonesia. They could, because of all the wars, etc. So that's why my father landed in the Netherlands, and I was born in the Netherlands. And so that's my father. So his parents, like 20 years earlier, were married in Batavia. So that's the wedding picture of my grandparents. And I've also a picture of the parents of my grandmother. So that's again, let's say, 20 years earlier. And so these are my Gombong roots. So they were married in Gombong in 1898. And so my grandmother at the time, or great-grandmother at the time, was like 16, and my great-grandfather was like 17. So they were extremely young for that time. But they look, they look pretty. And then the mother of the groom here, I also have a picture of. And so this is the great-grandmother of my father, and we call her Oma Chang. So she is here in the center of this family picture. So this is again 1920, so the wedding of my grandparents. And she is Javanese. She's really in the center of the family. She was really important and well respected in the family. She was born in 1848 in Fornerod. And so she became extremely old, so she's on all the family pictures. I think she became, like, let's say, 85 years old or something like this. Now my own family, I have also a picture of my own family. So this is my own family. So we like to in the summer we like to go to the mountains in Switzerland or in France. So this was last year. So there's me, there's my wife, Judith, and these are my two sons. And I don't know if you noticed, but the color of their hair is red, right? Red. Whereas my hair is brown, and the hair of my wife is also brown. But according to their DNA, they're really my children, which of course you checked like a scientist. But it's because I am a carrier of the red hair gene. And also, my wife is a carrier of the red hair gene, but it's recessive, right? So if you have a child, if we have a child, you have a 1 in 4 chance to get a red-haired child.
And that's naturally red.
It's naturally red. It's naturally red. And so we did this 2 times. 2 times. So chance 1 in 16 to get 2 boys. So this is I think this is the surprises of genetics, right? Okay, so when this is 20 years ago. My oldest child is 20 years, and so when I got children, I realized that when you have children, you transmit something to the next generation. So then I thought, okay, so I'm transmitting something, but what am I transmitting? So then I became interested in my Indonesian family history, because that was completely mysterious to me. So therefore, so in these years, I researched my family history, and I talked to all family members from these roots of Oma Chang. And so she has 5 sons, and then these are the grandchildren, and then these are great-grandchildren. But you can already see that her descendants are spread all over the world. So some of them are in the Netherlands, some of them are still in Indonesia, some of them are in Australia, and in Canada, and in the United States. So this is quite, I think it's typical. So Indonesian ancestry spreads around the world very much. Now if you want to construct something like this, like a family tree, what you normally do is, so I'm going to talk about this tracing of Indonesian roots. So how do you do that from Europe or from Indonesia? So you can do it through archives, but you can also do it through DNA. But normally you'll start, if you want to construct something like that, you start in the civil registry. So these are archives. And the civil registry in the Netherlands was introduced by this guy, Napoleon Bonaparte. And so he the famous general, he conquered the Netherlands in 1794. And he stayed until 1814, so quite some time. And so the Netherlands at that time was a little bit kind of backwards country, and France was much more advanced. So they had these systems of civil registry. So Napoleon introduced the civil registry in the Netherlands. He introduced also all kinds of other systems in the Netherlands. But the civil registry, it records the birth and the marriages and the death of individuals. And it records the parents and the occupation of the parents, and the place that the parents live. So it's a very useful source if you want to construct this family history. Now, Napoleon didn't influence Indonesia too much, just a little bit. So he had this representative, the famous Dadels, here in 1808, but then already in 1811 he was kicked out by the British. So there was only a few years of influence, I think, but the influence I think was quite big. Probably you know better than me. But the civil registry in Indonesia was only adopted in around 1850, so these archives are still present in Indonesia, but many archives are lost. And they're kept locally, so these archives are kept in Indonesia at the different cities, so they're not centralized in the Arsip Nasional, and they're difficult to access, people think, but actually that's not always the case, because this is an example, it's Semarang. So if you know where they are, so this is a local government building in Semarang, and you see that in those shelves are the civil registries of the colonial area, just like new. So this is an example. So you can read it and you can see the original documents with the signatures of the parents and signatures of the witnesses, etc. So that's a rich source, but difficult to access, especially from Europe. And I think also from Indonesia, it's probably not so easy to go into a city and find the civil registry. However, there's a copy of the Indonesian civil registry, and it's here. And I don't know, does anybody know where this is? This mountain? No? No. Okay. So it's called Granite Mountain. So, and it's in the United States, in Utah. So near a city called Salt Lake City. And this is the center of the Mormon religion. And the Mormon religion, so this is Salt Lake City in Utah. So this mountain is close by. And this church is called the Mormon Church of the Church of Jesus Christ and the Latter-day Saints, officially. And because of religious reasons, they find it important to collect ancestral information. So information about grandparents, parents, grandparents, great-grandparents. So they went everywhere in the world and photographed civil registries. And also in Indonesia, so in the 80s and 90s and 2000, they went around Indonesia, and everywhere they could find civil registries, they photographed them on microfilm. And I still don't know how they managed that. Right? How did they manage? How did they get permission to do this? For me, it's a complete mystery. But anyway, they did that, and so these photographs, kind of the copy, is in the family history library. That looks like this. These little drawers with microfilms. But nowadays, you can also see them digitally. So they digitized many of them. And this is an example of a birth certificate. I think it's like in the 1860s or something like this. It's difficult to read, but what you see is here you see the original signatures of the father here and of the mother, Tuangan. So that sounds like an Ambonese name. And then the witnesses, and then it says who is born and who are the parents and what is the date, the time, and the place of the birth. And so these handwritings are very difficult to read. So this is a resolution. Right? It doesn't get better if you zoom in, but if you stare at it, then you can recognize the name. So in this case, the person who was born is this, and this is Louis Fritz. It says Louis for Louis Fritz. So that's an example. So how can we navigate this Indonesian civil records? So there's two ways, and one way is to access it via the society that I'm secretary of, and this is our website. And we have recently introduced these flags, these country flags. So it's also in English, French, German, and Bahasa Indonesia translated automatically. So I think that usually the translation is not very well, but so it's better to use Google Translate or something like this. But you can, in principle, you can click on these flags, and then we have documents per city. So these are the colonial names, and you can click Banjumans, Borkato, and then you can then click and see where is which. So where is the birth of 1849 to 1910, and then you can still click further, and then you see per year which image contains which information. So the registry and then the numbers and then the dates. So this is an example of Bandung microfilm of this. But then if you want to go further and you really want to see the document, you have to go to a LDS church because they're not accessible globally. But I think in Indonesia, so everywhere in the world, there are these centers. Maybe in Jakarta, I haven't checked it, but maybe there are. But of course there is, as you know, in the colonial order there were 3 different separate legal systems. There was one legal system of the Europeans and the Japanese, and there the civil registry started from 1850. From the Indonesians, the civil registry started much later, only in 1920, and for the Chinese, the Arabs, the civil registry started a little bit earlier, like 1919. But all of these can be found, let's say, in this archive of this Mormon church. And so you go to, for instance, to family. So this is the second way to access them. You go to familysearch.org, and then you have to type in a name. For instance, here Surabaya, and then you get the links of the films of Surabaya. So you see here Surabaya, the birth, the marriages, the death in a certain time. So 1825, 1990. So also until recent. And then you can click here, and then you see where the films are, and then here there is the little camera sign. So now I'm behind the pillar, so I cannot be viewed by the audience, sorry. But the little camera means that in theory there is a digital record, but you have to go to a church in order to see it. And so, well, this is one example of what can be found. This is a Chinese civil registration of 1942, and so you can see it reads, so today, Thursday, the 15th of January, 1942, in the middle of the day, somebody appeared to me, he's the job, so he's a civil servant, and then so there's a Chinese name who is registered. Sometimes, so this is interesting for Chinese and people with Chinese roots. Sometimes there's also the Chinese notes on the side, so you can sort of translate between the Chinese characters and. So that is available from 1919, 1920 for Indonesians and Chinese Indonesians. However, before that time, there was no civil registry for Indonesians and Chinese. However, there are church records. So especially in the Catholic Church, everybody was registered, whether you were Indonesian or Chinese or European, if you were Catholic. At least if the man was Catholic, then also the women would be registered. And these church books are present still in the local churches, but for our society we have a project to photograph them and to transcribe. So this is an example from Semarang. And so we have Ron van der Wal, who is a volunteer who often visits Maarten, and then he photographs these church records. Sometimes they are in perfect shape, sometimes they are sort of meshed, sort of split apart. And then we have in our society these church records then are photographed and transcribed by volunteers since 1986. People do that, but it's a slow process, right? But they become now available in digital format and also in print. So these are books, and so I should not forget to in the digital format I have to give a USB stick with all these records to so it's a lot of information. So I leave it here. So if you want to access it, you have to maybe contact, make a copy. Please don't put it on the internet completely. Okay, but so that people can find, right? Can find these church records and church names. Now, And one example of people that contact us about this was done last year. These are not Dutch. These are English doctors, English television doctors. So they're called Chris and Xant Van Tulleken. It's a Dutch name, but they're British, and they're sort of famous British television doctors. And then there is this television program in England. The name is Who Do You Think You Are on the BBC, and they trace the family history of a famous person. And so they contacted us because they found that they had Indonesian ancestry. Namely, a foremother of them so they had Dutch ancestry, and via the Dutch ancestry they had Indonesian ancestry. They came to this foremother, so it's a great grandmother of them, Maria Anna Hamar de la Bretonnière. And she lived, so it's a beautiful picture of her was painted. And she lived in Salatiga, and was born 1823, 1878. And so the question of our society is, can you give more information, right? So because we have these church records, we could find them, and so we went. So Ron van der Wal, he went to Salatiga to the church, and he actually found the original baptism record of her, which is it's there on the top. It's not easy to read, but it's in Latin. So it's a Baptist Catholic Church, Salatiga. So she was baptized 1824. Maria Anna Villa Naturalis Petri Hamar de la Bretonnière ex madre Ividi Libera Nomina Daria. So this says that her mother was Daria, and her father was Peter Hamar de la Bretonnière. And then there are so this is for them that was a very interesting source. They even also found the baptism record of Dari. So then her name was changed into Martina Daria. So she was baptized a bit later. And for them and for the public that views these television programs, that is very surprising, and it's very interesting to find this. This document, this proof of the existence of this Indonesian foremother, and so they were really amazed by this. So this is an example how this collection of indexes can be interesting for many people. So this is a copy. We didn't bring it to the studio. It's a copy. Now, because of this interest in Indonesia from Europe, the membership of our society, which is the IGV.nl, so it's the East Indies Genealogical Society. So here you see the number of members, and in orange, so at a certain point we introduced digital membership. So you could access digital information. And it's a bit scary because it looks like a complete exponential, right? It looks like an exponential. So I'm secretary, so I'm scared. So last year we had our 1,000th member, and for some reason, so surprisingly, he's in the audience. Is Johan Helling. He's accompanying me in this trip to Indonesia. He was the 1,000th member, and he owns together with his brothers, he owns an Indonesian restaurant in Haarlem, very good Indonesian restaurant, where my two sons work part-time in the kitchen. So everything's connected, and actually, so we visited Gombong yesterday. Because so my ancestry, but also Pakyo's ancestry is in Gombong, and in Makassar, but also in Gombong. So then So this is the behind the logo. This is our society, and so this is the team that works. And so on the left there's the president and the secretaries, the treasurer, the members. Our past president unfortunately died last year. John Sudirman, a Japanese, Dutch person. He was a medical doctor. So it's a mix of all kind of people that are interested in Indonesia. We have experts. So I see that I haven't translated this slide, but experts on all different topics of this heritage. So we are actually a network, and a network of linked organizations in the Netherlands, but also abroad. So there's good links with, for instance, the Chinese-Indonesian Heritage Center. So there's a whole connection in the Netherlands of these types of organizations. And one important pillar of our society is what we call Indisch Archief, which might be translated to Arsip Indonesia Belanda. It has now, so we opened it last year. It has 1.4 records, and these are usually records for persons related to personal history in Indonesia. The website is indischarchief.nl, and so what's in it, there's a lot in it. So this is part of what's in it. It has civil records, an index, but not the original document, but it has an index. It has other civil registrations of, for instance, Java, Madura, early 19th century, graveyards, pictures of graveyards, civil servants, military records, lots, passenger lists, church books, address books from Indonesia, war victims, also from the VOC time. There's lots of information, digital, decorations, there's a railway archive, notary records, marine telephone books, encyclopedia. So there's secret service records. These are very interesting. Of course, they only are opened after 75 years, but that's about now. Much more. So I'll give an example. So it's a professional database, and so I give an example of what you can find. So my last name, Fornerod, and then you get a couple of hits, 13 hits, and then one of them is my great-grandfather, Augustus. So he was the one from Switzerland who went to Indonesia first. And then you can click, and then you can clicking, you could immediately go to the original entry of his military service in the Netherlands, and that's in the National Archives in the Netherlands. So the document itself, but we have a link, we provide a link to that. And you can zoom in, and you can see all the details, many details of his life, his military life. As an example. Now, so this is big data, right? Big data. There are many other big data archives nowadays in Europe, and so these are some of them. So both in the Netherlands and in, for instance, in London and in Berlin, there are digital collections related to Indonesia. But I only have time to touch upon those because this otherwise it would be the rest of the day and tomorrow. So I only give a few examples, but if you want to have more information, you can just contact me. So this is Delver, and Delver is a website of the Dutch newspapers. And so they are scanned and they are OCR'd, so they are character recognized. And so if you search that, for example, with the name Suwiknyo, random name. Yeah. So you get some hits. You get 30 newspaper articles, and one magazine. So you can check. And then, so these are the hits, and then you can click, and then you can see, for example, this is a colonial. So Mr. Zowigno graduated in the medical school in Java. Surabaya. So we don't know whether this is family or we don't know. But as an example, it's Delphi. It's in Dutch. It's in Dutch, but you can translate it in any language. So you can also, with Google Translate, you can get an Indonesian kind of language version. Then if I again put my own name, you see a few more hits, but try let's say per hour, you get millions of hits. Or you can do it in English. So for me, English is a little bit easier. So there's newspaper articles, magazines, and then if you look, so I usually, if you want to translate it, you just do Google Translate, right? And for example, this is, so you can select, and so it's important to select here, this is the name. And then the distribution area is Dutch East India's Indonesia, so you select for that here. And then, for example, you select for family messages here, family messages. And then there are only seven left. And then this is, for example, the engagement advertisement of my grandfather and my grandmother. So you can find it back in the local. This is like it's called the News of the Day, 1990. So this is one example of something you can easily access and give you information also about Indonesian history. And then there's another big data. So I just want to show you briefly. Because it's a website called zoekenintranscripties.nl, but it gives transcriptions of handwritten documents. So there are kilometers of handwritten documents of the VOC times in the Dutch archives, also in Archief Nationaal, but also in Dutch archives, and they started to recognize the handwriting automatically. And so this is done by artificial intelligence and deep learning. So I give an example. So for example, you search for a search term. And so you can also translate this in English. Now here I use the word and so it gives a hit of the list of inhabitants and trees of Ambon of 1694. So this is 17th century document that you easily pick up to looking for some name. And so if you check then what is there, you see the original document, and then on the right you see the automatic transcription. So you see here in the pink, you see the word, Charzunko, and then here you see what is actually recognized in pink. And then sometimes it's really amazing how good it works. And of course it's not perfect at all, but it's pretty good. And so it reads so you can also translate. You can translate it in English. So you can see that this is a name, Pangujangan, widow of the Chinese Chamsunko. So the Chinese, so it's a person that is a widow from a Chinese person in 1940. So it already tells you that at that time in Ambon, the Indonesian population was very much mixed. Right? It was a mix between the Chinese and Indonesian, China. And of course that's because always has been a mixture of people from the earliest time. They say that Indonesia is genetically the most diverse country in the world, because people already in 60 million years ago, people traveled from China to Australia, and so everything, from the earliest time, there was traffic and there was trade, and so how this is an old Dutch map, by the way. So it's very funny because Australia is called here Hollandia Nova. So they were sort of optimistic that they would put Hollandia, Australia, as a part of the Netherlands. So how to understand this complexity, we come to the second topic of the talk, and this second topic is DNA. And so this is my field of expertise. So it's my job, my real job in the Netherlands, to be a geneticist, cell biologist in the biomedical field. And I studied DNA already for 40 years. And this is what it looks like. This is the iconic DNA that everybody knows. Even I have it somewhere with me. Yeah. So once a student gave a 3D printed version of DNA, so I always carry it with me to remind me how important this is. But DNA usually under the microscope looks more like this, right? So these are the chromosomes, the human chromosomes. So we have 46 of them in pairs, and so if you look through the microscope, they're not really colored, but these are pseudo-colored. So every chromosome has a different color, and usually then they're arranged from big to small. So the largest human chromosome is chromosome 1, and then the second largest chromosome 2, and then the smallest is chromosome 22, and then there's the X and the Y chromosome. These are the sex-specific chromosomes. Now, so I want to talk a little bit about DNA, what it is, because if I ask a random person, what is DNA? So everybody knows what DNA is, but what it really is, sometimes you don't know exactly what it is. But what I consider a correct answer, well, there are many correct answers, but what I consider a correct answer is that DNA is a code. Primarily, it's a code, and it's a long code. Right? It's a code of 2 billion letters. There's only 4 different letters, A, G, A, T, and C. And this code is used in 2 independent ways. So it's first used to instruct the cell what it's doing. Right? So it's decoded. This code is decoded. So that's the first version, first function. But the second function is to give information to the next generation. So that's why DNA is also called the hereditary information. So it's only copied. So that's the second. So these are 2 completely different functions of the DNA. And the second function is of course very useful for history, because you can trace, because it's copied all the time. You can trace history, so it's copied. So there's a little example of the code, how it looks like. So what people often don't realize is that your own DNA is like a mosaic of the DNA of your 4 grandparents. So here's so this is schematically. So and in the bottom it's yourself. And it's a mixture of your four grandparents, and you don't inherit exactly the same amount from every grandparent, whereas you inherit exactly 50% of your parents. That's exactly 50%. But from your grandparents, sometimes you inherit more and sometimes less. And how that works biologically, I can explain. It's beautiful biology, but I won't do that. it's also good to know that that your four grandparents are still, I mean, they have different colors, but they're still 99.9% identical. So it's just the differences, the slight differences that make us different. But also, of course, you realize that each of your grandparents is again a mosaic of their grandparents. And so you can understand that the result of that is this, right? It's a complete gado-gado. Kind of. Now so that's for everyone. So the DNA of the Indonesia Belanda is often a mosaic of that of the Indonesian, the Asian, Northeast Asian, Southeast Asian, European DNA, African DNA, and it is of course because of all the trade that was going on between these regions. So we call that admixture. So mixture of all kinds of DNAs. Now this copying, so this is the copying of this DNA, is very, very precise. So it's incredibly precise. However, it's not perfect. So sometimes you get a change. You get what's called a mutation. So here we see this red G. I don't know if you notice. So this T has changed into a G by an error. And that sometimes happens. It happens a couple of times per generation. But it's not really an error. It's a design. Because if it would be perfect, if the copy would be absolutely perfect, we still would be, let's say, the one-cellular organism in the primordial soup, right? Because so basically, without this error, there cannot be evolution. So it's not really, it's a designed error. Now, they think, so one of the ideas is that the original human beings came from Africa, and the first population, the population we all descend from, is like 5,000 generations away from us at the moment. And so this 5,000 generations produces a lot of errors. And because of the errors are usually, because of the errors are in history, you can trace back your the ancient history by these errors. And you can also see that the populations that are close together geographically are usually also close together in DNA. However, there are many differences, but still 99.9% identical. So that's less than 0.1%. So that's a few million differences, and these few different people can test, and they get something called a SNP array. They test 500,000 of these differences, and so you can do it commercially these days with MyHeritage or Ancestry or 23andMe, things like this, and it's reasonably affordable these days. Now, how do these differences look? So I'll give an example of my own ancestry. So this is my father and my mother. So you see, my father is Indo man, and my mother is Dutch. So my mother is 100% from Drenthe. And Drenthe is a province in the Netherlands. It's in northeast of the Netherlands. However, she grew up in Tarutung. Tarutung is in the Batak countries. And my father is like 70% Southeast Asian, and also Northeast Asian, most of Indonesia, also some Chinese. And the rest of it, 30%, he's from Europe, so a little bit Swiss. And then the rest is like German and Belgian and Dutch. So if you visualize their DNA, so this is a map of their DNA. And so you see from the left to the right, you see these 23 chromosomes. So the biggest chromosome is on the left, that's chromosome 1, 2, etc. And these are colored according to ethnicity. And you see that my mother has mainly yellow, so that's the yellow is northeastern European and Caucasian and Mediterranean. So that's a real European, that's a pattern. But my father has more colors. So the red is Indian, South Indian. The greenish is Southeast Asian, and the dark green is Northeast Asian. The Northeast Asian, that's probably China. Yeah. So it's interesting. You can also look at different regions. So you can, for instance, look at matches that my father gets in his Chinese region. So there's a little part in his DNA that is on chromosome 7. It's a little match with somebody who's called Brian Hong. And I wrote Brian Hong because I got this match. And then he says, "Hi Maarten, I'm of Asian descent, 90+% Chinese, based on a couple of DNA sites. My family is from Taiwan and has been there for hundreds of years." So meaning that this common piece of DNA from me and this Taiwanese person is some ancestor, and some of his forefathers moved to Indonesia, and somehow ended up in my DNA. And I still don't know where this Chinese heritage exactly comes from. But 2 years ago, I found this picture of the parents of my father's maternal grandmother. And these are the only pictures that I found. Actually, it was a scan of a document. The original document was thrown away, and I only have the scan. But the mother is Lena Pieter Babu, 1844, 1896. I don't know anything about her, except that she was born in Menado. But would you think, you're the experts, would you think she looks a bit Chinese, or you think she's like what do you think? You think that she looks a bit Chinese? Yeah. Okay. So it could be that this woman is, let's say, the source of this Chinese DNA in our gene. Now, so I want to talk a little bit about this Chinese-Indonesian family history. So there are, in the Netherlands, there are many sources to look for your Chinese ancestry. So I think also I think probably several of you might have also a Chinese ancestry, right? So there are these are all the sources, but I don't have time to go over all these sources, because otherwise we won't be here tomorrow. So I want to present two of them. The first is the Kongkuan. Do you know what it is, Kongkuan? Okay. So Kongkuan is, and I want to talk about Chinese graves. So Kongkuan, Batavia, it's the Chinese Council of Batavia from the 18th century up to 1990. And it's emerged in the second half of the 18th century as a representative bodies of the Chinese autonomy, and the council needed to collect taxes, and that was the most important, I think, most important part was to handle minor criminal civil lawsuits, but also register marriages. And so this, the Kongkuan is at the moment in Leiden University in the Netherlands. And it is digitized, so you can access this. So it contains many papers, but it also contains population registers. It contains a census, registration of immigrants, marriage registrations from 1772 to 1919. So really early. And so from the Leiden University, you can access it. You can look for the year, and then you can click, and then you get a document, of course, but it's in Chinese. So this is the document that you can view. So it's difficult to access because this is part of a big PDF. However, I think it's time to character recognize this and then to transcribe it, and so it becomes more accessible. So in theory, this is going to be done without any doubt in the coming years. So that's one. And the other source are the Chinese graves in Indonesia. So there are many Chinese graves, so this is one under construction. But there's also historical graves in Indonesia. So they look like this. Maybe many of you have. So how to read it is in the center. You always see information about the person who is deceased and his partners. And then at the top is the most important part for history because it's the clan name. So with these characters, you can sometimes trace back the family to Fujian, to the Chinese mainland, and then look in a village where they have the zupus, and the zupus is like a family history of the village until like say 2000 before Christ. So they have amazing documentation. Then on the right there's the dates of birth and death. That's sometimes difficult to read because it's like there's so many years of this emperor. So the year is not, but it can be done. And then on the left there's all the children and grandchildren of the person. So these tombstones are just a source of family history. So it's very important to recognize that. And then the question is, where are they in Indonesia? So they're everywhere. Can we read them? No. No, we cannot read them. Is there an index? No, there's no index. So we have, with our society, we had a project near Makassar in Bolangi. And in Makassar, which we will visit in the coming weeks, many historical Chinese graves have been moved because of the expansion of Makassar, and then the oldest graves are moved, and they're moved now to Bolangi, and so we had a volunteer that arranged somebody to pass by. So this is the entrance of this cemetery, and if you look in, you see that the old graves are transferred there. Looks like this, and so we have a local context to find and photograph these oldest graves in Makassar. And then we have contacts with the companies called My China Roots. And My China Roots is an expert on Chinese history. And so they have read and indexed it. So they put it accessible. So it's now these graves are now accessible via My Chinese Roots. So you see now here there's 212 gravestones, and an example is this again, this gravestone in the Makassar. And now you can see that it's transcribed, and so the relatives are there, the granddaughters, grandsons, and so that's all information that is present on the left, and with the Chinese characters. And you can see with the map where it is, and this is another. This is the Major der Chinezen. So you have 3 decorations and many different children, grandchildren. So we collaborate in this project with this guy, Huang Li. He's the founder and the CEO of this My China Roots. He's born and raised in the Netherlands, but his parents are from Semarang. So actually he's Orang Semarang. And he lived for many years in Beijing, now he moved to Paris. And so most of his clients are from the United States. But he really is he's really motivated to also help Indonesians to photograph, and so we collaborate with him. But there's a little Vimeo YouTube or a Vimeo presentation of his. I think it is in Dutch, but nowadays you can automatically translate in English, or maybe there's subtitles, I'm not completely sure. Okay, what is the time? It's 10:15, perfect. Alright, so now I want to switch gears a little bit. So this is this family tree that I showed you before, you know, the Oma Chang and all the family members. So my father is this. Billy is my father. These are my uncles, this is my grandmother, my great-grandfather, my great-great-grandmother. So she was married to a KNIL soldier, sergeant, but he died in 1899. And he was, so this is the only picture that we have of him. So he was a sergeant in the KNIL. He was called Frits Brouwer. Opa is grandfather. He was married to Oma Chang. He was a music teacher. He was first a sergeant and then became a music teacher in the Gombong pupil school. And he died in 1899. So what can I find of him? You know, how can I find his ancestry? I mean, he looks really Javanese to me. I don't know if you. So, but he has a Dutch name, Brouwer. So is he Dutch? Was his forefather Dutch, or was he Indonesian? So the number of generations of my grandmother in Indonesia was more than 7. So the name Brouwer of that lineage has been in Indonesia for more than 7 generations. And the earliest document I could find was in a local VOC register in Pekalongan. And so this is a document of 1794. So they're called the Landmonsterrollen. I don't know if you know that term, Landmonsterrollen, in Pekalongan. And so he says so that Johannes Arnoldus Brouwer in 1794, and he was a member of what was called the Inlandse Burgers. And so what are these Inlandse Burgers? Native civil people, native civics, I think you would translate it. So they could be either from Asian origin, or they could be a mixed population between the descendants of the VOC and the local population, mainly Javanese. So many years ago, I tried to find that out, who is the father of this person, and this is at the end. This is how far I got. So I didn't find his father, but I found his potential father, right? So I looked in the archives, I looked in all kinds of archives, and I made a network. And so this is this last person that I know for sure is an ancestor, and so these are his colleagues, or he worked for this person, Frederik Jacob Rotenmuller, and there's a young Brouwer who also worked for him. So possibly this is the father, but I cannot find anything else. And all of this happened in Pekalongan. That's why I want to visit Pekalongan. So how can we get further in this without any archives? And so the solution is Y chromosome analysis. So now I have to talk a little bit more about DNA. So I want to visit. Actually, I want to visit this. So this is Benta Pekalongan. So this old VOC fort in Pekalongan, and so I want to visit it, but it has become a prison. So we try to contact people who can. I mean, there is a way to get in the prison, but then it will be difficult to get out of the prison. So I don't know. But we will see. Okay, so the Y chromosome is the smallest chromosome in men. So they only carried by males, So that, therefore, I always say it's the most important chromosome. It's International Women's Day today, so tomatoes. But with the Y chromosome, it's transmitted from father to son. And so with that, you can trace, in principle, you can trace your pure father ancestry. So from great-grandparent to father, so you can trace it back. And so there's projects that worldwide have sequenced the Y chromosome, and based on that you can make these historical maps, right? So since we're in the Department of History, I mean this is something that you are really interested in, the migration of people out of Africa to all kinds of the world, and they do this based on the Y chromosome sequences because it changes so seldomly. So now here I put my great-grandfather in the middle, and so I wanted to test somebody for the Y chromosome, but I cannot test my father because there is my grandmother in between, right? So because then the grandmother stops this transmission. So I had to find somebody in the pure male lineage. So I asked a third cousin of mine, Frans, he lives in Canada. Now he's a good friend of mine as well. To test his Y chromosome, and this was the result. The haplogroup is M269, and this is a Y chromosome that's very, very much European. So that gives the answer to that question, you know, or it gives a preliminary answer, because actually you have to repeat it with somebody else, because there can always be accidents, let's say, in the male lineage. So it gives an answer, and then the question is, so who was that? So at the moment I don't know, so all kinds of speculations. Maybe it was the Governor General, Hendrik Brouwer, or maybe it was derived from the Friese Brouwers, we don't know. But, so that's why I want to go to this prison to find out. Okay, now since it's International Women's Day today, I want to finish with a project that is related to women, and it's a project of our society with a number of other society, and it's called the 10,000 Foremothers Project. And so the Indonesia Balanda's heritage in Europe, it usually starts in a female line. Not always, but usually starts in a female line. But often there is not much known about these women, because they are not in the civil registry. And their parents are not in the civil registry. So now we have started, let's say, a grassroots project to collect images and oral history of those about those women and put it in a big database. And so, and the idea is that if you put these big images and stories of these foremothers, you get some sort of environment that in the latent space you can find everything back. And the latent space is the space in between the lines. So you can, so even if your foremother is not present, you can sometimes read between the lines of other people about the life, the type of life that she has lived. And so it's a collaboration between our society and a youth organization. It's called Tracing Your Roots, because there are many young people also interested in Indonesia, in the Netherlands at the moment. And the CPG, that's a government organization about genealogy. And last year we opened the project with the first 100 images in May. And so there were talks of Rex Bai and Bibi Breiman. Bibi Breiman is a famous Dutch Indonesian Instagram personality. So she has hundreds of thousands of followers on Instagram, but she's also a very good writer, actually. She's a very good writer. So she opened it, and so this is the first 100 images. So it's like a mosaic, and behind every picture there's a life story of her, if it's available. Sometimes not, but this is all early 20th century. right information, and so you can just go there. It's freely available. It's in Dutch at the moment, but I want to make a Bahasa Indonesia version. But you can also use Google Translate to make an English or Bahasa translation. And so there are stories about their lives, and it grows automatically. So so this is one way. This is a new archive, but we can also use DNA to study the foremothers, and that's the last DNA story I'm going to tell. So there is another piece of DNA that I haven't talked about. This is not on the chromosomes, and it's called the mitochondrial DNA. So it's very, very small, and it's present in your mitochondria. And the beauty of the mitochondrial DNA is that it's transmitted only through the female line. So it's like the opposite of the Y chromosome. So it's transmitted from the female to the child. So, but it's not transmitted from the father to the child. So in that way, you can, and so they don't change very much. So there are all kinds of types. These are called haplotypes again. So all kinds of colors, and so you can ask yourself some questions about this heritage. Now again, I want to go to this television program of Hans Goedkoop, because he was also interested in his Indonesian family history. So I constructed this maternal ancestry of this Hans Goedkoop, and so to the left you see Hans Goedkoop himself, then his parents, then his maternal grandparents, etc. All the generations that could be found in the archives. And so this is, so in white, this is the pure Europeans. So, and the rest is a mixture between European and Asian. And in pink, the female, and in blue, the male. And so he has an interesting mix, historical mix between Armenian people, so they're Armenian or traders from Armenia, actually from India, and also Indonesian. But there was one question mark, this Indonesian roots, this maternal ancestry. So Johanna Christina Kessler, so she is the grandmother of his grandmother. And so the question is, that person that lived was born in 1801, the question is, can we find out a little bit more about her? Right? Can we find something? And so what you have to do then is you have to trace back the maternal line to present. And so that's always difficult, because in the old system, so the name changes every generation. But because of the archives, you can do that. So I found a person in the pure maternal line, and that person is Miluska Dorgelo. And I asked her, do you want to participate in this project? And the good thing about the maternal heritage is that it's very secure. So it's almost 100% certain who is the mother of a child, right? Whereas with the father of a child, you're not always sure. They're not always sure. So she did that, and the result was her mitochondrial DNA at the haplotype R9C1A. R1C1A. So that's a very abstract name, but it's just a name of this mitochondrial haplotype. And is there something known? Yes, this mitochondrial haplotype is very, very much Asian. So it's present in Timor. It is like 4% of Timorese have this haplotype. There are certain groups in Malaysia that have this haplotype. So it's sure that this foremother is Asian. So it's present in the Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, Taiwan, and Thailand, and now also in Netherlands. So in the Netherlands, there are many people who carry these Asian traces in all of their cell without they realize. Because if you look at Melusco, she looks completely 100%, 200% Dutch, right? European, blonde hair. Yeah. But still, in her core, in her mitochondria, she's Asian, which I think is very interesting. All right. So my conclusion is that the archives and the DNA can be used to get a clearer picture of our individual histories, right? And these collections of individual histories, they are a rich source of human history, and they kind of complement, let's say, the top-down history, the official history from the governments. And so connecting, so what we see here is the connection between Asia and Europe, and so this connection, in my view, makes this world a little bit smaller. So that's my dream, right? To make the world a little bit smaller. So thank you very much for your attention. You can ask me anything, right? So ask me anything. So I'm in the email, I'm in LinkedIn. You can, if you want, I can give you my WhatsApp number. I don't do Facebook. Sorry, I'm not on Instagram either, and I'm also not on Twitter. But you can ask me in person, of course. Yes, or you can also contact me if you want to have a free trial access to this in this archive, the Indonesian Belanda archive with the 1.8 million records. Just ask me, I can give you a trial access to it. So that's all I wanted to say. So 90 minutes exactly. So thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maarten, for your unique presentations. Anyone, if you may have a response or questions, maybe you could just mention your name and then the questions. Okay, one, and perhaps we could have 3 questions.
Okay, so my question is about when you say that this person that have a completely blue hair, or completely red hair, or completely like a West person, can you describe it like, oh, there's a small amount from her that is from Asia. How can you describe it from Asia, this small amount? What is it? Like, I don't really understand what this small amount is.
Okay, so what you're asking is whether this small part of the DNA, for example, in this woman that has mitochondrial DNA, has some function, right? Has an Asian function, and changes the way the person maybe behaves or metabolically behaves, and that's biology. That's a biological question, and for many parts it's not known. For many parts it's unknown whether this DNA is either just a historical tracer, or it still has some biological influence. But I think it's both, right? But the smaller the amount, the smaller the biological impact, I think. But still, I mean, but small changes in DNA can have a big impact. When you see it with the red hair of my sons, it's only one nucleotide difference, and it changes your hair between brown and orange.
Please, next.
Thank you, sir. I just want to ask one simple question. During the advancement of our technology in the world, we see that some of a person can be one picture. We can see his or her picture in now, but some people has no picture. With the AI advancement technology, can we use the AI technology to see that, oh, this is his picture or this is her picture in now? Because it's already family tree from 2 or 3 centuries ago, so we cannot see our own family right now. Thank you, sir.
That's a very interesting question. So the question is, can we recreate somebody's face from just looking at the DNA? And at the moment, not really. We can predict some features of a person, like the skin color. You can kind of estimate the hair color, the eye color, but this is a science in itself, and it's still progressing. I don't know if you see the, so there is this this Iceman in Europe. So it's a Paleolithic person that was found under a glacier, and they tried to reconstruct how he looked like because through his DNA. So they recreated kind of his skin color and his hair color, but the rest was kind of fantasy, right? So that's not yet known. The other point is that your appearance is of course partly due to your DNA, but it's also partly due to your environment. Because if you I don't know if you ever met monozygous twins. When they are young, they look very much like each other. But the older they get, the more difference you see in their faces, also in their behavior. So I think, and it's also what you eat. So I think your appearance is probably 50% genetics and 50% lifestyle. Is there one more?
Okay, anyone?
Thank you for the presentation, and try to understand it. It's very interesting. I'm just wondering how you would progress in your research in connecting these actually family members. Are you starting with the DNA and with the archives, but archives are not always available, and in that sense, are you relying completely on the DNA or what? And then you presented these maps of your grandparents, Mama Chan from Gombong, and already with so many lines of ancestry. Then is it the direct offspring of your great grandmother, or also the family of the siblings of your great grandmother?
So in that graph, it's only the direct ancestors of the parents themselves. So they're not of their siblings, because otherwise the tree would be very, very big. So there are computer programs that can help you with that. So what that chart was made pure on the basis of archives and family archives and family knowledge. But then I did test a couple of my family members to get more information about their ancestors. Not only Oma Chang, but also the other ancestors. So that's one. So what I sometimes do is that I have my somebody's DNA, and then we look at matches, and then based on the matches, you can find possible family members, and then you can look more, let's say, more direct in the archives, whether you can find support for that, or whether the archives and the DNA are kind of giving the same conclusion, and if not, then it becomes even more interesting. What happens? So it's always a mix between looking at the DNA matches and looking at the archive evidence.
there's anyone have questions?
I have a question. There's like this problem about the accessibility of DNA tests, especially in Indonesia. I think DNA test is not really accessible in here due to like how expensive it is. So if we want to know about our ancestries, so I think the easiest way is maybe through archives. But what happens if we don't have a last name? Like most of Indonesians, we don't have last name. So how do we trace our ancestries without knowing our last name?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So indeed, in Java, many people only have one name. However, in other regions of Indonesia, people do have last names. For example, also Minangkabau and Batak. So in other regions that's easier because there's last names. Also of course in the Kraton they have extensive family histories. So you have to rely. So in the absence of the regular Javanese person that only have one name, so you can go to the civil registry. But that's from 1920. But still, from 1920, that's still quite some generations from now because that's 100 years. So that's for maybe 5 generations. So that's not too bad. So you can do that. What I don't know is whether in Islamic churches, in the mosques, there is a registration of marriages with name, like in the Catholic Church. So maybe you can answer this question for me. Is there some kind of registration in the mosques?
No, we don't really have that.
So there is so the DNA tests are kind of expensive, but they become cheaper. I think now, especially in Father's Day or Mother's Day, maybe the price drops to maybe something like 20 euros. I think that's the bottom price, 20 euros, which is still quite a lot of money. So I will give. I have 2 tests that I will give to Dr. Zunino. So if there's an interesting question, I think it's up to you to distribute that to the person who are interested. I have them with me. I brought them. It was a gift from the company to me. So that's my heritage. Yeah, does that answer your question a little bit?
Yeah.
Thank you. If does anyone have a question, please?
Thank you. You know that people in the world is divided, but for races, Mongoloid, Austro-Melanesid, and Ghosamid, and the Greek. But by the invention and discovery of DNA, we know that, like you explained before, that maybe almost million people in Europe, that is Caucasus, have Asian heritage DNA in their body. I want to ask your opinion. What is the future of the races? Is there really fun to us in the future, or it will be we will reconstruct the dividing of people in things?
So what was the last part of your question?
Can we reconstruct how we divided our typological the people in the future?
So how can it help to bring together? Yeah. So what you say is that indeed in the Netherlands there are, let's say, 1 to 2 million people that Asian heritage. I think in Indonesia, there must also be millions of people that have this European ancestry in their DNA. Well, I know for sure that my family members that live in Depok, they have this European DNA, and also partly, but they're completely culturally very Indonesian. Even though they like cheese a lot. I had to bring them cheese. So I think that if you realize that you have a common ancestor, it's very difficult to fight that person, right? Because we're all family, right? You don't fight your family. So my hope is that if you realize that that your forefather was actually Dutch, then you don't go and conquer the Netherlands, for example, or the other way around. So that's does that answer your question?
Yes, I think that because we mix, we generate from mixed DNA.
Yeah.
People in the world in the future, maybe could not identify them as European, as Caucasian or more, just because they are mixed from very many.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So this is a kind of philosophical question now. Yeah. So if we are all going to be mixed, do we still have an identity? But I think your identity is not your DNA, right? Your identity is your culture, is your cultural surroundings. So that, I think in that sense, it's not so important which DNA you carry, which kind of identity you have.
Because the development of the science, I think how we identify ourselves, maybe we go some different from how we identify. Jadi karena ada perkembangan sains, from the development science, apakah kita cara mengidentifikasi how we identify ourselves will be different?
Yeah.
Dari sebelumnya.
Yeah, it could be that you identify in a slightly different way if you see that your DNA or your ancestry is very much in common with the rest of the world. So what do you think yourself? Do you have hope?
Yes, I have some hope because by divided of the people in the world by some race, people just live by the appearance of the physical appearance, use it to discriminate others. But for the example that the politician that from Netherlands, the widows, that he has the ancestry, the DNA from Asian, but he still used his appearance to discriminate others.
No, that's true. That's very human. I mean, the discrimination is also, let's say, part. It's kind of a part of human nature. I fear that our tendency to judge other people by the way they look is kind of something that's in our nature, which we have to fight, right? We have to fight it, but you have to accept. In my opinion, you have to accept that this is something that is in our nature, and you have to realize that it's a problem. And so I don't think that, and there will always be changes. There will always be differences. Even if we look much more the same as we do now, I think we will still see differences in each other.
you so much for the insightful lecture and sharing your experience, your recent experience here with us. My question is, I'm a historian. This kind of approach is completely, maybe will add something in our historical course. How do you perhaps you have an idea how to make it useful in the Indonesian historiography approach, and what kind of history that might produce with this kind of approach in Indonesia. In some cases lately, that the DNA test will also remedy the ethnic conflict in happen, and also you mentioned before about discrimination, thing like that. Would this kind of approach would produce a kind of a certain historiography that might useful for the Indonesian historiography specifically?
So, so I think in Indonesia it would be very valuable to have a very large sampling of the Indonesian population, because it will show that it will show the amount of mixture that is over the centuries has happened in Indonesia, and it can help to realize that Indonesian people are more connected than you would expect if you look at the individual, let's say, local recent history. So that would be one sort of message that could come out of the DNA work. But more historically, it's very interesting to see the migration of people, right? To see the historic migration and maybe to connect it with artifacts that you find in archaeology. So I think the combination between DNA research and archaeology could be very powerful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, anyone? Well, we still have time. If there's no, okay, please.
Okay, thank you. Mostly Indonesian people didn't make text like remarks. So, for instance, my family. What if we use DNA like inherited disease? I think DNA consists of many things like Y chromosome like that. So, if we use inherited disease, is it possible? So, thank you.
Thank you. That's a very good question. That's also related to the work I'm doing in the University of Rotterdam. Indeed, DNA changes are also very important for heritable diseases. So there are, let's say, the well-known genes that are causing genetic diseases like brain malformations or predisposition for cancer, like the BRCA1, BRCA2 is most famous for that. Huntington disease for brain disease. So these are the topics that we study all the time in genetics. Then the other question is whether your DNA profile, so without any major mutations, gives you information about the future of your health, right? So if you go to, let's say, MyHeritage or 23andMe, they want to sell you some information about your health as well. So they look at your DNA and they say, well, you have a probability of, let's say, more than 50% more than average to develop heart disease, for example. So these kind of information is very tricky and it's very unreliable because these are multigenic traits. So they look for a combination of differences in your DNA, and then they look at, they compare it to studies which associate changes in the DNA to diseases. So it's like, it's a bit like modern astrology. It's modern astrology. Of course, and also this information usually comes from the Caucasian population. So the information that is relevant for the Caucasian information is not at all relevant for the Asian population or for an ethnic population like myself. For example, I read these reports and they say, well, you know, I have this variation in my gene. You have, let's say, a higher chance for heart disease, something like this. And then in the European population, this is a very rare variation. But in the Chinese population, for example, this is very common. So, but it doesn't mean that the Chinese population is at risk because of this variation. It's all very indirect evidence. So, so my advice is not to do that. And don't take those medical advices based on your DNA. If you want to improve your health, eat healthy, don't drink alcohol, don't smoke, and get some exercise. That's my advice. It's much cheaper as well.
Okay, we are at the end of the discussion, and please once again give applause for the Dr. Maarten. Thank you very much for the attendees, and then thank you for the Dr. Agus for making his public lectures good set, and then thank you very much for Dr. Maarten for visiting our college. And have a nice day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.